2 Corinthians chapter 4, the last verse, while we look not at the things which are seen, but the things which are not seen, for the things which are seen are temporal, things which are not seen are eternal. When we're going through difficulties in life, we have to look at the things that are not seen, because sometimes the things that are seen look pretty discouraging. The things that are seen can be the things that are causing us a lot of troubles. And so it's really important that we can do that. Okay, good. All right, we are still working on document 12 and egotism versus maturity. All right, let's talk a little bit about this as I was preparing for class and thinking about this. The subject of egotism and maturity is like really, really important. How many people out there are just living lives of absolute immaturity? They just don't ever grow up, you know. Certainly nobody in this room, but, you know, it could be somebody that you know somewhere that might be living like that. And so this lack of maturity probably causes us more grief than anything else, relating to people who are self-centered and dealing, especially get married and you marry somebody who's like self-centered, or maybe you have a little bit of it yourself. Well, what could cause some of this? Okay, number one, extreme early doting. You see that on your notes? Okay, everybody online here? Good. What could be some reasons for lack of maturity? As we look at lives, since this is a situation where we're trying to understand people's lives, trying to understand our own lives, trying to understand how to help people, extreme early doting. That means when a child is young, they get so much attention, they grow up at the center of attention, all the adults cater to him or her and their whims. This is not outgrown, and the person grows up to believe that everybody owes him whatever he or she wants, like right now, okay? And so you can get extreme early doting where you get parents are just catering to everything this little child wants. And after a while, this child thinks that the world owes him everything. The world owes her everything, and you get involved with this person, and you know they're going to expect that you owe them everything also. So we're going to be careful as we're raising children, as we're teaching children. If you're going to dote on them all the time and give them everything they want, we're going to be raising children that are very egotistical. And as I've seen people like this, as I've lived long enough to see some people grow up and become hopefully adults and get married and have families, and yet they lived lives of selfishness. And I reflect back how they were treated. Sometimes they were just the apple of the parents' eyes, and maybe the grandparents too, and they couldn't do anything wrong, and everything revolved around them. And, you know, they had pictures of them everywhere. And not that some of these things are wrong, but to do a lot of this, eventually you're developing somebody who is going to be egotistical, okay? Number two, family unity. This can be good or it can be harmful. Sometimes you can get a family that is so tight that they think everybody owes the whole family everything and nobody's good enough for us, okay? And so you go to visit them and you got to be careful you don't break anything or touch anything or breathe on anything, okay? And of course, when somebody wants to date one of their children, nobody's quite good enough for them. And so, you know, the family unity can be good. It's good, but if it's exclusive, it can create this ethnocentric concept. Ethnocentrism is when you think that your system, your family, your ethnos, your group of people is the center. And so that's what we focus upon, and we kind of ignore the fact that other people really do exist. And so we can create this concept where we're so good, no other family or person is good enough for our fine family. So we'd be careful that we, as children are growing up, that we raise them in a way that they accept other people, have visitors, guests in the home, help them understand that, you know, some people are poorer than we are, some people are richer than we are, some people have different concepts of what the world's all about than we do, so they understand that and they don't think that their little world is a universe or an island all to itself. Okay, number three, fears. Fears can be totally controlling. Fear of rejection, fear of loss, fear of danger, fear of damage. So these things can make us very egotistical also. If you have fear, if you have been injured, if you've got problems where you've been not valued, you've not been cared for. And what happens is we put up these defenses around us to protect ourselves, which keeps us inside this little circle. And many times it's fears. Fears to keep us in there, where now the only way we can defend ourselves is we have to be the primary object in life, and nobody's allowed to challenge us. And you try to get into somebody's life, a person who's like that, you try to get into their life, and there's just so many barricades you just can't get through. Why? It's not so many times because they're trying to be alone. It's because they feel alone, and they're afraid if they allow you in there, then they're not secure anymore. So they keep that cocoon around themselves for security because there's so many fears. Number 4, control. Persons typically find a way to control or manage their environment. Self-centeredness is one of the control options. They will not relinquish autonomy, even if it means complete isolation. You get somebody who needs to control their environment so thoroughly that they're willing to sacrifice relationships, even to the point of complete isolation, so as to be able to control the environment. You might go to a church, you might go to a Bible school, might go to a family gathering, and because you need to control everything, if you feel a little bit out of control, you'll jump back into isolation. You'll go into your room, you'll shut the door, okay? You'll study all the time, or you won't make eye contact with people, okay? We are willing then to relinquish anything, even if it means that we're completely isolated, because it's the only way that we can totally control a situation. Number 5, self-image. Image maintenance can be engrossing. It will consume the person to the extent of not being able to see other persons as real people. So if we have an image that we're trying to maintain, and the image is so fragile, that image will be maintained at any cost, even if it means keeping other people out or not allowing them even to speak into our lives, not allowing us ourselves to relate to them. Number 6, unwillingness to change. When confronted with truth, they'll avoid or relocate instead of making personal changes, and this prevents openness and maturity. Many times you get people who go from church to church, from one relationship to another. They'll have a friendship with a family for a while. That'll break down. They'll make a friendship with another family for a while. That breaks down. They go to another one. There's just an unwillingness to change. And once again, it's usually fear. The fear is that if I start to change, I might lose my own identity. People won't know who I am. I won't know who I am. And if I change, if I allow myself to change, then what's going to happen is that I'm going to lose my identity. So there's an unwillingness to change so as to preserve who we are. Yeah, it's very, very difficult. Those people, extreme early doting, people who were raised, right now I can think of several examples of people, some men, some women, extreme early doting, so that they were it, okay? Grandparents, parents, uncles, aunts, somehow this person got singled out as they were going to be the person in the family. And anybody remember seeing anything like this anytime? Okay. And how do you deal with them? Most of the time they won't pay any attention to you. You try to bring correction into their life, they'll just run. My experience has been that you pretty well have to wait until these people run against the wall somewhere. And when that eventually it should happen. Okay. Eventually it typically does happen. Eventually it happens because they just have so many struggles and difficulties that eventually they'll bump into somebody who won't take their egotism seriously. And it could be in marriage. Many times it's in marriage. This person gets married, and because they're egotistical, the marriage doesn't go well. And after a while, there's some kind of a big bump and blow up. And maybe that's when you have to get in there and help them see that the reason for the problem is their self-centeredness. Very difficult to work with. Extremely difficult to work with. And especially as I see this happening with little children, sometimes I'll talk to the parents. I'll say, they don't want to hear this, right? But you say, you know where this is going? Where this is going is that you're producing a child, by the way you're training or not training them, who's going to be almost impossible to live with someday. And you try to confront those people, and it's just constantly stonewall. They'll stonewall you at every turn. because they've been told that they're it, okay? And they've been honored and lifted up, and they're the best things that's ever come along. And now you're telling them something different? No, they're not going to listen. Okay, possible cures. Self-perception must be self-denial. Meet the needs of others and trust God to meet your own needs. Self-forgetfulness. Think of what will bless the other person. Instead of thinking about how you're going to get something out of this situation, how can you bless the other person in the situation? The friend you have, your spouse, your child, your parent, whoever it is, how can you bless that person? Think in terms of I and thou and not I and it. We talked about that before. So people are not things to be exploited and be used. Don't think about people as objects or things or a source of money or a source of pleasure or a source of, you get some people who just have to talk all the time and they're looking for somebody who will listen. Well, it's not really fair to just single out the people who are quiet enough to say, yes, yes, yeah, that's nice, okay? And they'll find people like that. They don't really want a relationship with the person. They just want somebody to bounce their ideas off of, okay? You get very powerful people who sometimes will hire somebody to work for them just so they have somebody to bounce ideas off of, okay? And it's very, very difficult. So think of people as being whole persons. Number 4, think of people as whole persons. People are not to be fragmented into bodies or employed or body parts to be used or minds to be controlled or votes to be counted or sounding boards used to reflect our ideas. People are not just bodies to put in a truck to drive your truck for you, okay? People are not just bodies to hold a hammer and build a house for you. They're whole people. That person who's building your house or driving your truck has fears and longings and hurts and desires and pains also, okay? So you just think of, well, let's hire Joe because he's good at, throwing hay bales. Okay, that's very nice, but he's more than just strong arms, okay? He's a real live person. We want to meet the whole person. Think of the person as the whole person and not just fragment them into components. Okay, number 5, volunteer. Compliment other people. Help people understand. I know some people, when they get older, sometimes you get older and you start getting more self-centered. People get more self-protective as they get older because their bodies don't work as well and they get more insecure. Maybe their income goes down. They can't get out there and work as hard as they used to. Maybe they haven't saved much money. Now here they are. And so what can you do for those people when they're having depression or struggles? Well, what you can do is help them to reach out to other people. And I've talked to older people who are struggling. I said, well, would you consider volunteering at the local hospital? They need people to push around the carts with the magazines and the drinks and all that, or maybe the local rest home. And so many times they'll just say, no, I'm not going to do that. But if they will do that and they start reaching out beyond themselves, many times there can be really good changes in their life. Okay, compliment other people. Can you just notice somebody at church who got a new dress or a new car or was taking care of their children nicely and compliment them for doing that? Look for things where you can compliment other people. Okay, number 6, don't participate in feel-good sessions and seminars that emphasize telling yourself that you're beautiful and all that kind of stuff. This stuff is out there, okay? So after a while, people start going to places where, I just feel so good when I go here because they tell me everything's fine and everybody is complimenting me and so on. So be careful. It's not wrong to have friends that tell you you're doing well and you're working hard and doing things right. But at the same time, when you're just always going for those kinds of things, there's always a new doctor in town. There's always a new church. There's always somebody new. And what you're doing is looking for this feel-good stuff so that now we've always got somebody continuing to tell us we're doing fine, which hopefully they do. But when you're chasing those things, not a good sign. Okay, the last one, emphasize boundaries. Respect and honor other people. Egotists are not very good with recognizing boundaries. Okay, this is the last one. Emphasize boundaries to respect and honor other people. Egotists don't do very well with boundaries. They don't see your boundaries. They just come rushing right across them. They typically have pretty strong boundaries themselves, but in terms of you coming toward them, they get really defensive, but they don't tend to see your boundaries very well. So we try and help them see that you do have boundaries. So people are trying to control you. They always have to have it their way. They always need to be the center of everything. Well, what's happening? What's behind that? If what's behind that is a fear of that they don't amount to anything, if what's behind that is a concern that they've been told they're nobody, and so now they've got you, and they're not going to lose you. They're going to control you and make sure your energies are always flowing toward them. If we can get in back of that, and we can see how that, if we could provide the security and significance they need, maybe we can see that start dropping away. How can we do that? Well, they might be asking you to do everything for them. And so, just as an illustration. And so you might say, here's a little task I'd like you to do for me. Could you do this? Okay, and make it really simple so they can't mistake it and they can't go wrong and they're not going to goof up because then they'll feel worse. Some little things, and then you praise them for it. Well, that was really nice. You did a good job. Okay. And so if you start seeing them beam a little bit, you can start seeing a little bit more security develop and hopefully be less clingy. Okay, let's take a look at conflict resolution. If I can find my notes here. There they are. Okay, let's take a look at Proverbs 26, starting reading in verse 17. Proverbs 26, 17. He that passes by and meddleth with strife belongeth not to him, is like one that takes a dog by the ears, as a madman who casts firebrands, arrows, and death. So is the man that deceiveth his neighbor and says, am I not in sport? Where no wood is, the fire goes out. Talking about conflicts, okay? Good verses to remember. Where no wood is, the fire goes out. So where there's no talebearer, the strife ceases. If we can stop the gossip, we can probably stop the conflict, okay? In other words, is there a fire? Keep throwing wood on it, guess what? The fire's going to get bigger, right? Quit putting wood on it, the fire's going to go out. And that's what the Bible says. As coals are to burning coals and wood to the fire, so is a contentious man to kindle strife. Need a couple sermons on this here, there, and around, okay? The words of a talebearer are as wounds, and they go down into the innermost parts of the belly. If somebody's gossiping about you, saying things that are maybe not even true, that really pierces us deeply, doesn't it? Burning lips and a wicked heart are like a potsherd covered with silver dross. Graphic illustration there. Verse 24, he that hateth dissembleth with his lips and layeth up deceit within him. So people have hate in their heart, they have anger in their heart, and so then they're using their voice and their words to cause trouble. When he speaketh fair, believe him not, for there are 7 abominations in his heart. Somebody's like flattering you. Okay, well, do they really mean this? Maybe not. So be careful. We're talking about conflicts here. Whose hatred is covered by deceit. His wickedness shall be showed before the whole congregation. He doesn't love you, he doesn't care about you, but he's deceiving you and he's trying to act like he likes you when the truth is he really doesn't. And of course, ladies can get in this category also. Whosoever diggeth a pit shall fall therein. He that rolls a stone, it will return upon him. A lying tongue hateth those that are afflicted by it, and a flattering mouth works ruin. So be really careful about the kinds of things you say and the kinds of things you listen to. And you hear people talking, many times they're not telling you the truth. So conflict resolution assumes conflict is probable, assumes resolution is possible. We define conflict. What's conflict? A struggle or lack of agreement between 2 or more considerations. Can be between 2 people, can be between 2 churches, 2 families. What are some categories of conflict? When we study conflict in social science, we study approach conflicts, where there are 2 desirable options, okay? You want chocolate or you want strawberry? Oh dear, do I have to decide? Can I have both? Well, if you can have both, that's very nice, but if it's an either-or situation, you have to decide, okay? If it's an avoidance, when you don't want either option, the dentist says you want an extraction or do you want a root canal? Well, yeah, really, I don't want either of those, but either we're going to have to do one or the other, and so we get into those situations where we have to decide. We get approach avoidance, an option containing desirable and undesirable elements. Do you want to live in a house that's close to work, but maybe it's not such a nice house, or a nicer house, but it's far away from work? Okay, I have to drive farther. So, each option has positive and negatives in it, and so we get all kinds of difficulties like this. So, a double approach avoidance, we get two options, each containing desirables and undesirables. So, you want to work for somebody who is nice to work for, but they don't pay you very much, okay? Or work for somebody who's not so nice to work for, but they pay you well, okay? So we get in these situations where, oh, why do I have to decide? But there are so many conflicts and types of conflicts. Types of conflict: internal, where you search your own heart upon your bed to be at peace. You can have internal conflict inside of yourself, in your mind. You and God, we make peace with God by prayer, by being submissive to God. You and yourself, sometimes we don't accept ourselves. We don't like who we are. We're trying to be different. We can have peace with ourselves by being healed of emotional injury, by seeking that healing. Sometimes it's between you and the devil, where he's attacking you, and there's just this daily war with the devil, and so there's going to be conflict. I deal with a lot of conflict like that personally. Satan's trying to trip me up with something, trying to put me in a situation where things are really difficult. And so there's a daily battle, and you've got to go to the Bible. You've got to go and trust the Holy Spirit to see you through those things. So there are internal conflicts. There are external conflicts. Romans 12 tells us, as much as lies within you, be at peace with everyone. With other persons, we had already talked about forgiveness, so we try to have peace and forgiveness with other individuals. With friends, we know that Proverbs tells us that iron sharpens iron, so there are times we work with each other. There will be some conflicts. If you sharpen iron, there will be some emery sparks, right? Some of you fellows use grinders and emery wheels, and yeah, there will be sparks. There will be things flying out there. And so as we sharpen each other's lives, we rub against each other in that way emotionally, and the sparks fly sometimes. But if we accept that, we can become better. Home should be the safest place on earth. Your spouse should be a person who's very safe, very respectful, accepting you. There should be mutual love and care between you. With your children, there should be love, protection, training, and teaching. So these are external places where we can experience tensions and conflicts. With the church, should be the safest place everywhere. But unfortunately, not always. And society, tension should exist. With our Christian lives in a society out in the world, there should be conflict. If there's no conflict there might be a problem that we should think about. Okay. We've already looked at 2 Kings 4. Remember that? With the woman, the great woman who had this child, and then as the child dies, and the prophet asks the question, is it well? And so the answer came back, it is well. So as we think about conflict, it's got to be well with our own heart. It's got to be well with the people we associate with. It's got to be well with ourselves and God. Degrees and responses to conflict. Okay, what I've done here is set up a little bit of a chart. So if there's disagreement, we're starting with something very mild and going to something very difficult. Disagreement, what's the wrong way to respond? Well, give your friend a silent treatment, okay? Just act like you don't see them, walk past. Recently, I was talking with some married people, and I said, make sure that in marriage you don't give each other the silent treatment. Do you know what that's like? Even if you're not married, you still know between you and parents, between you and friend, between you and brother or sister, you can just sort of give each other the not talk treatment, okay? Not a good plan. Not really a good plan at all. What should we do? We should talk. You may ask for time. Sometimes I do this. I might tell my wife, you know what? I just need a day. Things have been so difficult, so many issues. Can you just give me a day? And tomorrow we'll talk, okay? It's okay to ask for time. It's okay to have time. It's okay to give somebody time. We need to do that. What about personality? When there's personality difficulties, the wrong approach is to be angry about it. Well, your personality and dad's or mom's or your boyfriend's or your wife's or your daughter or son probably going to be a little different, right? Okay. Well, we're going to get angry about that. Can be, but we need to appreciate the fact that they're not exactly like you. You might need to hear what they have to say. Might need to listen. Okay, so we can appreciate it. Personalities are so different. No matter what combinations you are of everything, you're going to be different. What about applications? If there are different applications of how to do some Christian practices or different applications of how to do things at work or in the home, we can reject them, or else we can try to understand the other person's perspective. Or, why do you want to operate in the kitchen like this? Why do you want to do things, the cooking and baking like this? Why do you want to do things on the farm a certain way? Well, let's try to understand it. What about principles? If there's a real principle, the wrong thing is to give in. It's a real principle. It's a biblical principle. It's important to keep. The wrong thing to do is to give in and not keep it. Okay. The right thing to do is say, well, my conviction is, you might be dating someone and maybe they don't have a conviction that you do. Well, are you going to give in? If it's a real conviction, if it's a real principle, then don't break the principle. Okay. It's not healthy spiritually for our lives. And of course, it can be a violation of the scripture. So if there are convictions, you want to stay with your convictions. What if it's error, something that's wrong? Do we just overlook it? Well, it might work for a little bit, but eventually it doesn't work. What the Bible says is that we need to forbear. And forbear means we address it, we talk to the person about it, but we give them space and time so as they can make some changes. What if it's really sinful? This is an outright sin. Do we tolerate it? That's the wrong approach. We're talking about conflict resolution. You don't try to resolve conflict when there's somebody living in outright sin. You don't do that. If it's sin, you've got to draw the line, and you can't tolerate it. It's wrong if you tolerate it. How's the right way approaching it? The biblical way is to confront it and then bring restoration. What if there's persistent sin? In other words, this person's living in sin. There's a sinful situation. You confront it. Restoration doesn't work. You could compromise. Is that the right way? That's the wrong way. The right way is, well, I guess we're going to have to separate. If you're insisting on living in persistent sin, we cannot continue to work together. And so, there are degrees and responses, degrees of and responses to conflict, and we need to think carefully about what the conflict level is and how do we respond to that in an appropriate biblical way. What are some principles? Restoration through redemption action is always the goal of conflict resolution. We're trying to bring restoration through redemptive action. Don't polarize, don't escalate. What does that mean? When I get into church situations that are difficult, this is what I say, this is what I think. Don't polarize. In other words, don't separate one group over here, one group over there. If you do that, things aren't going to go so well. And then if on the same time you escalate, they escalate, you escalate, after a while this just goes nowhere, okay? So don't polarize and don't escalate. Get things resolved. If they can't be resolved, if there's literally sin, then go somewhere else, okay? Otherwise, you're going to get caught in compromise and so on. Return good for evil. Bless those who curse you. There's times we have to do that. Vengeance is mine, I'll repay, says the Lord. So do not take offense. Don't take offense. Somebody does something evil and you need to leave the situation and you harbor bitterness in your heart, it will eventually destroy you. Be careful. Vengeance is mine. Leave it go. God knows. He can take care of it. The story of David and Saul comes to mind. When David could do something about it, did he kill Saul? No. He ran, tried to protect himself, but he realized that God had it in his hand. Don't use complicated language. You get in a situation and people go through all these machinations verbally and they're trying to tell you all the details of everything that ever happened and use language that's so confusing, and after a while you just get lost in this. Cut it down to the quick. Get it down to the basics so we can understand. Communicate facts and feelings. It's important we deal with facts and with feelings. We've talked about that before. Do not place people in an awkward and disadvantageous situations. If you back people into a corner, they're probably going to fight. If you give them something to fight about, they're probably going to fight. Sometimes, especially working with young people, they can kind of be very defensive, especially if they're approached by an older person. And so if you give them a reason to fight, they might fight. Sometimes if we take away the reason, they quit fighting. Okay? Does that make sense? So don't back people in a corner and emotionally or spiritually or some other way, but try and deal with them with language that's going to be useful. Provide a safe place to deal with conflicts. Provide a safe place. We've talked about that before, haven't we? It's really important that we provide safe places so people are able to deal with conflicts, and then don't invade their turf. Give them time, but we've got to sometime come back together again. All safe places eventually go away. Okay? All safe places eventually, we eventually have to leave our safe places, okay? We talked about Elijah in the cave, right? The angel brings him some food. He's safe and secure from Jezebel. Does God say, just stay in that cave the rest of your life and I'll feed you there? Is that what God said? No, it's nice to have that safe place, isn't it? But eventually we have to take ourselves from the safe place and get out there and employ it. We need to get strong and healthy, but eventually we have to do that. Now, in life, even though we have to do that, you do need to preserve a couple safe places and a couple of friendships. In marriage, hopefully, we will make our marriages safe places. Does it always work that way? Can it work that way? It really can. It really can. It's hard work, but your marriage can be a safe place. It can be the safest place on earth. And this is why I teach that marriage is the most healing experience you can have in this world other than your salvation, because you get a person who loves you and you love that person, and you're going to provide an absolutely safe environment for them, and you're going to focus your energy on them. You're going to devote your life to them. I mean, what else could be more healing than that? Okay, that's what God has designed that to be. But the devil gets in there and messes it up, and we get our struggles in our marriages, and after a while, it's not a safe place. But I'm telling you that it can be, and God wants it to be. There are some conflicts that should not be resolved. Okay, we'll get to some of those as we go along. Wisdom is knowing when and how to act and when to overlook a matter. It doesn't mean to ignore it. It doesn't mean to think it's going to go away if we don't do about it. But wisdom is knowing when and how to act in a conflict. We need to be wise so we can act appropriately. And when and how is what we need to be careful about. Do not have a conflict mentality. There are people, do you know anybody who loves a fight? They just love a fight. And when you get into a situation, they will couch their language in ways that put things against each other. Well, sometimes things have to be against each other, but we don't always have to do that. And if you have a conflict mentality, you will always then pose things as if there's some kind of a conflict. So you get into a situation where the person who has a conflict mentality, instead of a cooperative mentality, try to get in there and do some diffusing on that situation. Some people love a fight. If there isn't one, they'll make one. That's just how they operate. Things not talked out will be acted out. We learned that a long time ago. Resolve as far as possible and forgive what remains. It's an opportunity for God to work in your life. You get into a conflict with a parent, with a spouse, with a sibling, somebody at work. It's an opportunity for God to work in your life. Ask yourself, do I have some rough edges here that need to be bumped off? Okay, is there something that needs to happen in my life to make this work? Humility is the key to conflict resolution. Selfishness is the key hindrance to conflict resolution. And I've been in situations where somebody who really wasn't guilty in front of a church accepted the accusation against them, and you could almost feel the tension drain out of that place because they took away the reason to fight. How do you fight if the other person won't fight? It takes two to fight. Do your parents ever tell you that? It takes two to fight? Oh, yeah. Good. Have a team concept with complementary roles to utilize the strength of everyone. If you're not part of the problem, part of the solution, stay out of the process. That happens here at school. Sometimes there's a situation with students. It happens at church. There's a situation with somebody, and somebody will come to me and say, could you work with this? Could you talk about this? I say, is somebody already working with it? Yep. I say, okay. Then no, I'm staying away. You need me? Maybe, but no. Too many soups. Yeah, too many cooks spoil the soup, right? Too many cooks spoil the soup, and too many counselors will ruin any situation. If you're not part of the problem or part of the solution, then stay away. Don't blame, don't accuse, and don't cover up. Fears of loss, feelings of threats, lack of significance or security prevents conflict resolution. Lack of information prevents an accurate solution. I know in some situations I worked with over the years, I think in terms of puzzle pieces, like this class is sort of like putting puzzle pieces together, and you're working with somebody's life. It's like, okay, put the puzzle pieces together, you ask questions, get the pieces. After a while, you get a picture start to emerge. And sometimes I'm saying, no, wait a minute. There are a couple pieces of this puzzle that are missing. There's something you're not telling us. There's something that's not being brought to bear here. So try and pick up all the pieces, and if you can't get them all, you probably cannot get an accurate picture. Lack of planning will cause conflict. And sometimes you see this as a pattern in life. We talked about life patterns. There's some people who just don't plan. Don't plan at all. And it's true that plans are to plan around. Just because you have plans, that doesn't mean it's got to go that way. But you make plans and you can make an adjustment. But if people don't plan at all, there will be conflict, guaranteed. Make associations based on compatibility. Paul and Silas worked pretty well together. Paul and Barnabas had some issues. And if you determine that you're going to fix everything between Paul and Barnabas before you can allow them to go on the mission field, they'll never go. And some churches think you've got to fix everything, and the early church didn't do that. Sometimes we get personalities just don't work well together. Well, get Paul and Silas out on the mission field, and get Barnabas and Mark, or whoever he wants to take along, and get him on the mission field too. There are things we're not going to get fixed. We're not going to get resolved. And remember that hurt people do hurt people. Practical suggestions: define the issues with terminology. Clarify areas of agreement and disagreement. See if we can come to agreements to things rather than trying to argue about things that we don't know or arguing about. Make a list. What's going on here? Let's talk about the details. Understand the other person's point of view. Consider options and possibilities for management of conflict. Well, what are the options here? Our family's dealing with some options right now. Okay, get out a piece of paper. Option 1 would be we could do this. Option 2 would be we could do this. Option 3, well, maybe we need to combine option 2 with option 6 and make another option, okay? But we need to do those kinds of things. Evaluate the options, take time, don't be hasty about it. Make decisions about the wisest course of action. Make plans to implement the decisions, implement the plans. What I'm saying here is make a series of steps working toward a goal. Some scriptures here. Blessed are the peacemakers. Matthew 18, plan for resolution. Go. They won't listen. Take somebody with you, and so on. Be spiritual. Restore in the spirit of meekness. Consider yourself. You can also be tempted. Proverbs 13:10, one of the most gripping verses in the Bible, I think, on conflict resolution, says, only by pride comes contention. Is that true? You think that's true? Only by pride comes contention. So you have contention somewhere? According to that verse, what is it? Apparently it's pride. Okay. Only by pride comes contention. A gentle answer turns away wrath. A hot temper yields strife. Being slow to anger makes peace. Pride sows strife. Gossip separates the best of friends. These are from Proverbs. Are we doing a Proverbs? Are we reading Proverbs? Okay. Okay, good. So are we learning things from Proverbs? Isn't Proverbs amazing? All the things, all the truth, all the blessing in Proverbs. Okay. Pride sows strife. Gossip separates best of friends. Leave contention before it develops. Discretion defers anger. It's a glory to pass over transgressions, and that doesn't mean to ignore sin. It means if there's a personal transgression against you, somebody did something foolish or whatever, let it go. Let it go. Okay? Leave it where it is. Don't drag that along. Doesn't mean ignore sin, but if there's personal issues against you, leave them go. Cast out the scorner, and contention will cease. Is that amazing or what? Sometimes I used to have that on my bulletin board in school. Cast out the scorner, and contention will cease. You can get somebody in a situation who's a scorner, and they just can never be resolved. They're constantly fighting. There's constantly an issue. If you're going to have peace, they have to go. That's what the Bible says. Is that fun? Is that easy? No. I've been part of times when it had to happen. Cast out the scorner, and contention and strife will cease. Do not return evil for evil. Where no wood is, the fire goes out. Without gossip, the strife ceases. Pride stirs up strife. Trust in God makes a blessing. In Ecclesiastes 9, a poor wise man delivered the city, and no one remembered him. You know, that's a gripping verse to me. You might get somebody who's very, very wise, but they're poor, and nobody cares about them, and yet they had the idea that brought deliverance to a whole city. When it was all done, everybody was fine and safe. Did they remember the man who helped? No, he was poor. So there was no social mileage to be made. There was no political mileage to be made. Who cares? We just take it and go. You need to recognize those people. Okay? Paul and Barnabas separated to work in different fields. 1 Corinthians 6, is there not a wise man among you who has discernment to judge if you have struggles in the church? Paul says, isn't there a wise man? Isn't there somebody in your church wise enough to see through this? The implication is certainly there is. 1 Corinthians 8, do not allow your liberty to cause someone to stumble. You know, I don't wear a wristwatch. Did we talk about that before? Why don't I wear a wristwatch? Is that a sin? Is it a sin to wear a wristwatch? Okay, but I was raised in a group where that was a sin. So if I would wear a wristwatch, I could cause somebody to stumble. Right? If I know you think I'm a little crazy right here, right? But if I'd go someplace and I'd be speaking and I'd put up my hand and it would reveal a watch, there are people there who wouldn't hear another word I said. Why? They'd say, we raised him right. He should know better, right? And they'd walk out. Maybe not literally, but they wouldn't come back. You know, there are times when you might have liberty to do something and you do it and you cause somebody else a problem. Now, if you don't know about it, there's not much to be done about it. But I want to be careful that we don't flaunt liberties to cause conflicts. Okay. It's really important we don't. 1 Timothy 5, those that sin rebuke before all, that others may fear. If you get people who are recalcitrant and they're staying in sin, they've got to be rebuked. And people need to see that the church has taken a stance. Okay, this is wrong. You know, we're not going to tolerate this. The scorner has got to be cast out. John 13, by this shall all men know you are my disciples if you have love one for another. These people know how to resolve things. These people know how to live in peace. These people know how, when they've got a struggle, somebody can come in and somebody can bring healing to the situation.